Hey everyone, Joni here. There's an approach to arranging dance music that I wanted to give you a little demonstration of, and I'm going to illustrate it using a track by Peverelist. He uses this style throughout his discography. You can hear it in tracks like Grit and Saltwater, but it really slapped me in the face a few years ago when I listened closely to this track called Wireframes from the album Tessellations on Liberty Sound. It really this exercise changed how I structure my own compositions, so I want to take a little look at it. The crux of the lesson we're learning here is how to employ the elements of a song in a way that gives the listener a constantly varying focal point, and really make the most out of any given section by shuffling all the component parts around and never having every instrument play at the same time, and giving away the full picture. To help visualize what I'm talking about, what I've done is I've taken the MP3 of the track and I've dropped it into Ableton with the BPM set to the same as the original at 126. And I've trimmed just the very start of the audio file so that the beat grid lines up with the music. I've then reconstructed what the arrangement might have looked like while Pev was making this tune by dropping in empty MIDI clips to represent each of the different parts I can hear and plot out when each of them starts and stops. This is a really fun and useful exercise, and I'll explain a little bit more about how you can use this sort of exercise to help with your own tracks at the end of the video. The arrangement technique I'm talking about is happening across the melodic parts too, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to explain how Peverelist uses it on the drums and percussion in this track. And I'm going to start looking at around bar 32, which is about a minute into the tune. That very first minute is kind of a classic dubstep style intro, and then the beginning of bar 33 is where the sub bass drops in for the first time. So from that point onward, the next 32 bars look something like this. Let's have a listen. This is kind of our basic level of density for the arrangement now that the track's kicked in. You'll notice that even before the more complex layering of sounds happens over here, no 8-bar section is the same as the one before it. So what's going on here? Let's break it down a little bit. For the purposes of differentiation, I've named the hi-hat sound that sort of sits in the foreground and occurs twice every bar, chime hi-hat. Hopefully you can hear that. And then the more frenetic sound that's a little harder to pick out, if you listen for the kind of quick rolls, that's the fast hi-hat. There's nothing superfluous in wireframes. The chime works with the kick and the cowbell to establish that syncopated groove, while the faster hi-hat gives us a kind of rhythmic propulsion, and it really kind of heightens the contrast between the denser and the sparser sections of the song. Pay attention to how the ride cymbal loop is applied in bursts of varying lengths to push the tune along in this first section. It's up in the high end of the frequency range, which I often think of as where the energy or the excitement of a track lives. And the trouble with having cymbals that are up there coming in and out of the arrangement is that when they drop out, that feeling of excitement can disappear. Pev avoids this by having the chiming hi-hat with all that lovely metallic clang. You can hear it there. That metallic hi-hat carries on throughout so that the high frequency activity doesn't just stop dead when the ride cymbal stops, which is a great little trick. Getting to the meat of what I'm talking about then, the most notable instance of the technique we're interested in first rears its head in bar 49, where the snare drum and the clap begin trading salvos here. Here we have two rhythmic elements that sit in the mid-range of the frequency spectrum that would clash and pull away clarity from one another if they were audible simultaneously. This is what people often mean when they say that your mixdown starts with the arrangement. If you've got parts that you think might step on each other's toes, then get them out of one another's way in your arrangement instead of trying to fix it with EQ later on. By sequencing them in alternating 4-bar loops, however, not only does Peverelist avoid causing clashes in the mixdown, but arranging them this way avoids the repetitious structures that are all too easy to fall into when making club music. Moving on to the next section then. Bars 65 to 80 look something like this. The kick drum drops out to coincide with the introduction of the lead synth melody, while the chime and the ride cymbal hang around to keep time and hold on to that energy I was talking about in the high end. The sub carries on too to maintain the track's intensity, even without the kick drum pounding away. And it drops back in there, alongside the fast hi-hat, that rhythmic propulsion I was talking about. While a lot of the time in dance music we end up thinking in 16-bar chunks, pay attention to how certain elements persist across these boundary lines. If we take a look at the whole plot that I've laid out for this video, you can see that there are no discrete sections where one set of elements switches out to be completely replaced by another. Instead, the arrangement is constantly shifting underfoot. Something changes at least every 8 bars, and sounds overlap to bridge the sectional divides suggested by key elements like the kick drum or bass line dropping out or changing. You can hear the ride and the cowbell and the chime hi-hat carrying on in this section, so that we're not just getting a discrete stop where suddenly everything's different. There's a sense of continuity, and as things build back in, stuff like the clap bridges over these sort of dividing lines that we might have fallen into if we weren't thinking too much. This is applied not only to the drums but across the arrangement. You never hear every element at once, yet at the same time almost every sound can be heard with any other given sound at one point or another in the track's total runtime. Like we see, we have here 3.5 minutes into a track, a completely new element that we haven't heard before, changing things up, keeping us guessing. The other important thing that's happening for the track's sense of proportion is the variation in patterns within a given instrument. The lead synths are doing this, but we can also see it happening in the sub bass over here, where for just a few bars we get a different rhythm that helps to sell the build-up of anticipation ahead of key moments in the song. Let's have a listen. Not only does the rhythmic pattern change there in the sub bass, but it also changes partway through a bar. It happens again towards the end of this section, bars 93 to 96. You may want to listen with headphones if you're having trouble picking that out. This is something that can be really effective when applied across multiple percussion parts, but as you can hear, the subtle approach really works wonders too. This undulating approach to track writing combines with subtle atmospherics and dub mixing, and the continued introduction of new elements like the faster snare rolls that we've picked out before, or the melodic pad sound in the latter half of this track, to create an end product that feels sprawling and labyrinthine. Labyrinthine? You tell me. Anyway, it's unpredictable, and yet entirely governed by an internal logic that makes the results feel cohesive and super slick. Hopefully you've understood what I'm getting at when it comes to this way of laying out the arrangement for dance music. This exercise of plotting out an existing track in your DAW is a really simple and powerful tool for reconstructing how a song came together and understanding how artists build up their compositions, and I highly recommend it as an exercise if you want to get better at arranging, particularly for dance music. Just drop a track you think is really exciting into your DAW and have a go at making a little chart like this, so that you can visually replicate how things interact and play off one another. You can even go a step further and use that chart as a template for your own music by writing new patterns into the empty MIDI clips and dropping in new sounds. You don't even have to stick with the original instruments. Try swapping a kick drum for a hi-hat, for instance, and see if you can come up with some interesting structures from the skeleton, or I guess the wireframe, I couldn't resist, of a track that you already love. That's all for this one. I'm just going to make a little plug and say that I'm available for one-on-one online tuition and small group sessions, with priority access given to queer, trans, non-binary and black and minority ethnicity people. Find out more by going to my website at outsiderspeaks.co.uk and get in touch. See you again soon, sending love, and go make some gay ass music.